There we go.
Are we recording? Yes, we're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, we're recording. Good afternoon. Please take notice that the Wellfleet Conservation Commission, in accordance with the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and the Wellfleet Environmental Protection Bylaw, will hold a public hearing in person in the basement of Town Hall and via Zoom on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. Public hearings begin at 4 p.m. The business meeting will follow. In attendance, we have Michael Fisher, John Portnoy, Barbara Brennesell, and Leon Shreves. So we have a quorum.
And Bob on.
Oh, and Bob Stewart is online this evening or this afternoon. Okay, let's see, is there anything else we need? Nope. Okay, so the first hearing is Steve Statler. Gestalder. Okay. 130 Valley Road, map 9, parcel 641. Request for determination of applicability to remove the tree and replace the deck in kind. A couple of us went out there this morning. So, Mark, you want to?
Yeah, my name is Merle Van Meter, and I am a carpenter, and I'm representing Steve and Karen, who is Steve's sister. They're the owners of 130 Valley Road. They have a deck that needs to be replaced. Coming up through the middle of the deck is a tree. It's overhanging the house, and it's within close proximity to Gull Pond. It's been recommended that we request permission from the Conservation Commission to go and remove the tree and replace the deck in its current footprint.
If it works, it still need to be replaced.
It's a matter of opinion.
But it didn't look that bad. But
It's 50 years old.
yeah, right. It's doing well for 50 years.
Yeah.
So one question, you say in the application that you want to replace it with 3 hollies.
Yeah, there was recommended that there was some sort of mitigation.
That's
And
fine.
what was recommended was a number of native bushes for a tree of that size.
So the question is what species of holly?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's tons of, right? We haven't specifically decided, and we're not set on holly trees. It could be, we're open to recommendations for another native plant.
There is an American holly is native, so if you want to put it, those are readily available all over, at all the local nurseries. So if you want to put holly, American holly,
That's the one you'd want me to put.
that's the native one.
Okay.
There are a couple others.
Yeah, there are.
But that's the only evergreen one, so,
Yeah.
and they occur right up the road on Gold Pond Road, so they're local.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And I'll just add that as a special condition to plant that.
And
With
3
the-
is the right number.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll put the Latin name on there, so just make sure when you go to buy them, or whoever goes to buy them, that you make sure you match the Latin names.
Is there a specific spot that you would not want them or want them? Is my recommendation on the north side.
Generally,
The holly trees are nice because they're
they're the feature, right?
privacy trees.
It's up to the commission if they want.
My opinion is they probably would do the most good for wildlife if they were in a clump rather than spaced out a whole lot. So they're growing together.
Not in a line on the property line.
And we can add it as a condition that you get the location of the plantings approved by me first if you want, and then we can make sure that they're together and in a way that'll benefit the resource area. Not up by the road, obviously, but
Yeah. So that's a to be determined.
yeah, we'll do that.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay.
I move to identify Gestalter 130 Valley View.
One second.
Sorry.
Could I add one thing?
Oh, yeah.
That came up during the site visit this morning. There's the issue with the stump of the tree.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that you don't want the stump pulled and you don't want the stump ground down. And so in my application, I specifically said that the stump would not be ground. And I talked to Dennis Townsend, who recommended that the stump be ground flush. And I just want to make sure that, I just want to know whether or not I frame around this stump or whether the stump can be ground flush.
I looked into this actually.
What do you find?
And there's really no difference for the root
Right,
system,
right.
as long as it's flush,
Yeah.
you know, we're not pulling it out and we're not going beneath the surface of the ground, and it doesn't matter how
Right.
it's done. The roots will still stay.
And you want me to take a picture of that before I
Yeah.
frame and tag?
Did we talk about the support?
We didn't talk about the support here, but in the narrative, it says that they're gonna keep anything that's existing that they can, and if not, it'll be replaced with
Oh, I see.
years.
Okay, right. That's where I saw it.
Okay.
Did someone,
I've got halfway through.
Is it halfway through? Go ahead.
Right, so identify this as a -3.
Second,
Yes.
yes.
yes,
Robert?
Yes,
And, well, and I vote yes as well.
okay. Merle, who should get the original permit, you or the homeowner?
Doesn't make a bit of difference to me.
You-
They're out of town, they live in New York, they're here off and off.
Might be better for,
Yeah, we'll give it to you, Earl, if you want.
Do you want it mailed or pick up?
Either one works for me.
Okay,
Jen will email you and coordinate or call you once it's ready.
Happy to pick it up.
All right, you're all set.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
Jen will let
so-
you know when the permit's issued.
Okay, so no work can commence before the permit is issued.
It is at your own risk until the permit's issued. But it should be issued by the end of this week or early next week.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for working with them. Okay, item 2. This is the town of Wellfleet on the Cape Cod National Seashore. Does it relate to a huge number of pieces of property, what I'm not gonna read, but are fully listed on the agenda. And what they're asking for is a request for a minute order of conditions for the berm removal and mark restoration pilot project. And we have,
Good afternoon, Carol Ridley, Project Coordinator for the Herring River Restoration Project. I'm also joined virtually by a number of different project team members who I would ask maybe are given permission to weigh in as well. I believe we have Alex Patterson with EA, along with Jill Apollo, and Tim Smith is with us, as well as Lauren Lederman with Ducks Unlimited. If those folks are. There we go. And Tim, oh, awesome. Because there, we have, if it's okay with the commission, we have a few slides we were just gonna walk through.
okay, that sounds great.
Kind of put this all in context and explain it to you, and then welcome any questions you may have. And I'll cover the sort of introductory part of it and then hand it over to Tim Smith to talk about a little bit about the need for this pilot project and the site context. And then Alex Patterson with EA, the firm that's designed this project, will walk through sort of the specifics of the proposed pilot project. I also want to note that this is a collaboration with Ducks Unlimited, who received a NACA grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on behalf of the project, and have been working with us very closely in the National Park Service for a number of years to
Great.
pull this all together. So if I may, would I have permission now to put some slides up?
So I'm gonna promote you to panelist too.
All right, we get promoted, please.
Voted for one.
I tell you.
Right. That's. This go here. And all right.
We're done.
So this is an element of the Herring River Restoration Project, which is a joint project of the town of Wellfleet and the Cape Cod National Seashore, with support from multiple state and federal partners, as well as the Friends of Herring River. As the commission may recall, the Herring River Restoration Project Phase 1, which would restore 570 acres of tidal restoration to the Herring River floodplain, was granted an order of conditions back in May of 2022. And essentially that order covered all of the construction elements needed for that phase one tidal restoration. So in essence, the Chippewaset Neck Bridge and tide gates, the Mill Creek water control structure, the removal of the high toss road causeway. There's low road elevation culvert replacements needed for mitigation, as well as mitigation on private properties, 3 residential properties and the Chippewaset Golf Course. So all of those elements of water control and mitigation were specifically authorized by that order of condition. The order also included this paragraph in the project description, which acknowledges that in order to achieve the restoration objectives of the project, there is going to be a need for marsh management actions, such as vegetation management, marsh drainage, channel clearing, to improve stream connectivity, sediment supplementation to elevate subsided marsh surface. And at the time, the location, the timing, and the precise methods of this work were not clearly known. And so it was determined that, and specified in the order, that the project applicants would come back to the commission when there was that detail available. And so that's why we are coming before you with this amendment request, because now we do have a pilot project with specific design plans and purpose for which we are seeking authorization through an amendment to that existing order.
And I take it there'll be future amendments as identified.
Yes, correct. And so I want to underscore that this is proposed as a pilot project. And in our discussions with DEP in particular over many years, they advised that the project approached this as sort of on an incremental basis and test methods. So this pilot project is intended to test a method of marsh restoration that could be more broadly applied in the project, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, subsequently, DEP has issued specific guidance on many marsh restoration techniques, thin layer placement, runneling, ditch remediation, and habitat islands. And so we are mindful and have incorporated that guidance as well. So the amendment we're seeking is to authorize a rather modest pilot project that would excavate burn material, reuse a portion of that burn material on adjacent subsided marsh through thin layer placement, and then store, use, or dispose of the remaining 7,000 cubic yards of that material, which we can explain in a little more detail in a moment. There would be, in accordance with that DEP guidance, we have specified some corrective action measures. So as there's monitoring of the project, if measures are needed to address issues that are occurring, whether invasive species, settlement, et cetera, those would be employed. So we want that authorization to encompass those corrective action measures. And then we would, the applicants would provide seasonal and annual reports to the commission as monitoring is undertaken during construction and 5 years post-construction, and certainly advise you as we determine the use of that additional material, burn material, 7,000 cubic yards. There's a number of different options for the use of that material specified in the submittal. We would come back to the commission and advise you of that when those decisions are made. And to the extent that any future marsh management is requested, those would be subsequent authorizations that we would come back to you for. So that is the scope of the amendment request that we are seeking. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tim Smith, one of the architects of this project, to just explain a little bit more about project need and site context.
Thanks, Carol. I guess I'll just ask you to advance the slides as we move along here.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
I just want to state, I know some of you know me as the ecologist at the seashore. I've no longer in that position. I've retired from the National Park Service, so I'm still helping out with the project as best I can. I just want to stress I'm not speaking for the National Seashore, the Park Service. I'm just a private person doing this now. Obviously, there's nobody here from the seashore because the government shut down. If you do have questions for the seashore, I guess we'll have to get those answered some other way, but I can't really speak for them. Carol? Can you move ahead, please? So, the idea for this project, comes from the idea that, a lot of the existing marsh surface elevation within the Heron River project area is subsided. So these two maps here are showing the existing, wetland types on the left. So this is basically a map showing, vegetation or cover types. So you can see, we have the river in the blue, some existing salt marsh in the lower river, which is mostly Phragmites in the green, and then large areas um, of woody vegetation with a combination of freshwater marsh, shrubs and trees in the kind of the brown and yellow color. On the right is a map using some modeling techniques. It's a combination of hydrologic modeling and vegetation modeling, showing what vegetation or what equivalent cover types would exist if we restored tidal flow or when we restore tidal flow, but don't do anything about the elevation. So you can see a large amount of green, right? That's the salt marsh. So we're restoring quite a bit of salt marsh, but there's also quite expansive areas of blue, which is open water, and the brown color, which is mud flat. So this is saying these areas, tide gets open at Chaquasit Neck and tidal flood will either impound water, so they'll remain subtidal at low tide, just be water features, or would convert into mud flats, and not support wetland vegetation that is a primary objective for the project. Next slide, Carol. So obviously those areas in the map on the right there are huge areas. It's hundreds of acres that need some elevation supplement. It's much it's a lot to take on. We're not really sure of which areas are the priorities, which treatments could be used or most effective throughout these large areas. So we've selected these two small sites for these pilot projects to, as Carol mentioned, to kind of take this on a smaller scale, more manageable engineering and construction projects, and use this as an opportunity to collect data to understand these techniques and then apply those on a larger scale in the future. So we have the area we're talking about today, the berm removal and marsh restoration pilot, and then a second area down below by Mill Creek called Site 2 there by Mill Creek. That's another project, a separate project. We'll be coming back to you in a few months to talk about that, but we're going to talk only this application is strictly for the berm removal project. So next slide, Carol. So this is another map of the area. So we have High Toss Road crossing the Heron River floodplain on the bottom. The top of this image, you see Bound Brook Road crossing the floodplain, Merrick Island right there in the middle. And this particular image, this is LiDAR data, so a digital elevation model that was put together in the mid 2000s as part of our process of putting together environmental impact report and things like that. This is the one area with existing data back then that we could really see the effects of anthropogenic activities on the marsh and where it had a need for these kind of projects. So in this imagery, the lowest elevation is dark green, and you can kind of see through there the channel of the river, and there's Pole Lake Creek in the bottom going off to the right side of the map. You can see the layout of the Heron River in the dark green. The lighter green would be vegetated areas, not intertidal because there's no tide there. And then the yellow and some kind of grades into orange and red are the higher elevations. So in this stretch of the river between High Toss Road and Bound Brook Island Road was channelized in the 1920s, and the park, the seashore has the engineering plans that show this work. It was sponsored by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a precursor of DEP, actually channelized this river. as part of the whole mosquito control story. So the dike was built in 1909 to try to drain the marshes. It didn't work out so well. There was additional work to straighten the river, to ditch it, to try to dry it out in order to control mosquitoes. So when they created these channels, they went in there with an excavator and just dug out the section of marsh and threw material off to the side and created these spoil berms. So these are these yellow linear features that are parallel to this channelized artificial section of the river. And some of these areas you can kind of see the remnant stream channel, much more complicated, twisty, meandering kind of layout of the river. That's basically cut off now. Some of those are now pools or just low areas. But the river is flowing in that channelized section, and we have these very prominent spoil berms adjacent. So we thought, well, here is an obvious area where we have two things going on. We have the berms themselves. So the berms, that excavation of salt marsh filled over 4 acres of salt marsh. So that spoil was again cast off to the side and destroyed 4 acres of marsh. And then right adjacent to that, the whole area is very, very low. Those elevations are anywhere from about 0 to about 2 NAVD. Salt marshes around the harbor, so healthy salt marshes in the gut and all through the harbor area range anywhere from maybe elevation 1 up to about 4. So these marshes here are up to 2 or 3 feet lower than healthy marshes along the harbor and other places in Cape Cod Bay. So we have the combination of areas that are too high because they've been filled by the berm material, and then areas that are too low because they've subsided due to the tidal restrictions. So we have the opportunity to basically even out the situation where we can take the anthropogenic material generated by the channelization, lower those areas, get them back to the elevation where it'll be intertidal and grow salt marsh vegetation. At the same time, use the material to elevate the subsided areas and use up some of that material. Next slide, Carol. So here's just some imagery. These are kind of famous historic photos. These are 1903 dated, I believe. So before the dike was built, before the channelization occurred, and it's kind of hard to orient here. I see John in the room there. He can probably orient us a little bit better where these are, but the little map shows what I think are the perspectives of where these are. Basically, the point is showing that, prior to the dike and channelization, these areas were all pretty healthy looking Spartina dominated salt marshes. Next slide, Carol. So just some of the facts here. We're talking about the project area of about 15 acres. That includes the whole project area, including your access and temporary roadways and things like that. Working this channelized section of the river. The dredge spoil berms take up about 4.3 acres along almost 5,000 feet along the channelized reach of the river. They're 3 to 5 feet above the surrounding marsh surface. And then just to the west of the berms over toward Duck Harbor, we have 120 acres of former salt marsh, which is now the Duck Harbor, so-called Duck Harbor area. And again, at these low elevations that I cited before. Next slide, Carol. So this is the about 1980s looking at the area. You can kind of see the berms in this location is a little elevated, stretches along the river, but also the heavily vegetated, tree covered nature of the area. Next slide, Carol. And so we know that in 2001, the Duck Harbor beach area began to overwash. This area has changed. That overwash began after we had received funding and began the process of designing or thinking about this project. So we had an idea of how the project was going to work, and then Duck Harbor happened, killed all that woody vegetation. Subsequently, that was taken down by the Park Service. So this is what we're left dealing with. This is looking at the area where we propose to dispose of uh, the excavated material from the berms and elevate this area. The area is kind of hard to get pictures of because it's either very flat, so you only get a perspective, or to get up high to look over it, you're kind of back in the woods up on Griffin Island, so it's a little hard to get a good photo image of what it looks like now. Next slide, Carol. So this is an area of the berms. So again, the berms were incredibly overgrown with vegetation starting in 2022, I believe. We began removing, the Park Service began removing vegetation to facilitate survey work and soil testing. Next slide, Carol. So the berms are much easier to see after vegetation is removed. So again, before Duck Harbor occurred, and before the vegetation was cleared, and before it had LiDAR technology that allowed us to see the shape of the land, these berms are very, very hard to see even if you were standing right on the ground because the vegetation was so dense and thick. Once we remove the vegetation, they're much easier to see. This is another ground shot of the area proposed to put the material. It was hard to describe this because it's basically not vegetated. It's becoming somewhat vegetated now because of the changes arising from Duck Harbor. There are some salt marsh plants growing within this area. Phragmites has encroached some area. There's woody debris in the area. But this would all be incorporated into the project to, again, to bring material from the berms to basically area represented in this photo. I think there's another photo after this one, Carol. Yeah, so another ground photo looking back toward Merrick Island. Very, very wet, of course. That varies depending on what the harbor is doing. Next photo, Carol. Just another trying to depict the look on the ground. This is looking opposite way toward Merrick Island. The river is right there on the base of that upland on the right side of the photo. And I think that's it for me, Carol. Is there one more? Yeah, so I think this is where I turn it over to Alex for some of the engineering points to be made here.
Sure,
Yes.
thanks, Tim. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name's Alex Patterson. I'm EA's project manager and a senior ecologist for this project. So just walk through the next couple slides. I guess just for some more background, the sort of design process for this project started 2 or 3 years ago. We started out with some technical studies, including a topographic survey of the project area, like Tim mentioned, once the berms had been cleared. We also did a wetland delineation at that point to identify the resource areas. And then working with the project team, many of whom are on this call, came up with some sort of conceptual alternatives, which we'll get into on the next slide, sort of evaluated the pros and cons of those, and then eventually decided on an approach that is reflected in the design that we have now. That was refined over multiple different iterations of sort of the exact plan for what was going to be proposed, ultimately to come up with the design that is shown in the drawings, which the commission has. So basically the idea will be High Toss Road would be the primary construction access. So we'd be coming in there and then heading north up through the project area. The work will basically entail having an excavator and a loader working their way down from the northern extent of the berms, which we saw on that map that Tim described a couple slides ago, basically working their way out from the far end of where the berms extend on the west side of the Herring River back to sort of the main access point. So there's about 3,000 linear feet of berm. It's not contiguous, but that's kind of the overall length of where the berms extend along the bank of the river. So they start out working on the far end of that and then work back. And so in total, the plan calls for about 10,000 cubic yards of fill material that would be excavated. And the plan is to take the elevation of the berms down to a grade that will support salt marsh vegetation once the tidal restoration within the larger estuary is underway. So we looked at sort of the modeled tidal datums for this portion of the estuary under sort of the initial phase of the tidal restoration plan and based the proposed elevations within the berm areas to allow for as much salt marsh vegetation reestablishment as we can. And as Tim mentioned, that's about 4.3 acres of salt marsh that we'd be gaining through the removal of that berm material. So of the 10,000 cubic yards, about 3,000 is proposed to be beneficially reused within the floodplain of the Herring River to reestablish about 6 acres of salt marsh in an area that's subsided significantly due to the historic tidal restriction. So this slide just kind of shows the elevation ranges of the different marsh communities that we expect to develop there within the initial stage of tidal restoration. And then the remaining material will basically be taken off-site. I think the plan is basically to stockpile it on seashore property. There isn't a sort of defined plan for exactly how that material will be used in the future, but it could include any of the options that are kind of shown on this slide. So I think it's primarily sort of a cost-driven decision as to how much of the berm material we're proposing to initially reuse on site, and then the rest will basically be saved for future uses that may resemble what we're talking about now, or potentially be different. Next slide, please, Carol.
I think there's a question, Alex.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know I was gonna forget it, but now I won't forget it. So I wanted to ask it. Right up front here, I thought I read on page 16 that it said 7,000 cubic yards will remain in the berms after this project. And then, but you just said that the full 10,000 yards will be removed and the 7,000 yards stockpiled somewhere, which is correct.
So if I might just chime in, I think there's a question about, I think the desire here is to request authorization for the removal of the entire 10,000 cubic yards.
Okay.
The timing, as Alex alluded, the timing of the removal of the remaining 7,000 is dependent upon funding. So.
Okay, so here when you, on page 16, you refer to this project, you're just talking about the immediate placement of the 3,000 cubic yards on the marsh surface.
That's known use of that 3,000 cubic yards, but eventually we'd like the whole, the remaining 7,000 to be removed.
Okay.
It may be removed if funding is available and it can be removed and be stockpiled. That might be an option, but that might not happen on the same time scale.
Okay. I have lots of other questions, so please go ahead.
Okay, Tim,
Okay.
got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, was there another question?
Nope.
Okay. So I mentioned we sort of went through an alternatives analysis for this project. So this slide kind of just lists the major alternatives that we considered. The restoration of the marsh platform was basically selected as the preferred alternative, and that's what we're proposing in this filing. Other potential alternatives that we did consider and ultimately rejected in favor of the preferred alternative included these other things. So at, at one point, there was a thought that we could use all or a portion of the material to basically refill the channelized segment of the Herring River and reestablish the natural course of the river. That would have required a significant amount of dredging and basically would have been a much more complex project, probably for limited benefit. And so that was ultimately rejected. Another alternative basically would have been, instead of placing the material in sort of the slightly higher elevation zones that we have designed, to basically just spread it evenly across the floodplain. So this would be probably more straightforward from a construction perspective, because they'd be able to just kind of spread the material immediately, behind the berms, rather than relocate it and shape it in a sort of predefined way. But the benefits of doing that would be pretty minimal because of what our anticipated tidal elevations will be once tidal flow is restored to this subbasin. So that was rejected mainly for that reason. Another alternative basically would just be to excavate the berm material and just take it off site completely. Um, in that case, obviously, we'd still get the benefit of having the berm material removed and salt marsh restoration within the footprint of the berm, but not the additional benefit of the 6 acres of salt marsh that um, we are proposing to restore through the beneficial reuse within the floodplain. And then lastly, of course, we did look at a no action alternative. Obviously, really the only benefit there is just cost and avoiding sort of temporary construction related impacts, but no real ecological benefit to the system. So that was also rejected. Um, and then just briefly to sort of go over, I won't sort of go through this table in detail, but if there are questions, I can certainly speak to those. But I think this was included in the filing. Um, so basically, we're just showing sort of the various resource areas that we have on site and how those will change. So sort of the biggest change is that all of the existing BVW and land subject to coastal storm flowage resource areas within our project area will be converted to salt marsh as a result of the project, both due to the sort of physical excavation and beneficial reuse of berm material, as well as the restoration of tidal flows as a result of the larger Herring River Restoration Project. We also have some temporary work basically along the bank and within the Herring River itself, just for the installation of erosion controls and temporary turbidity curtain. But those are just sort of construction related impacts and no long-term change to the size or kind of nature of the resource areas within our site. Um, and then just as far as sort of the construction sequence and impact avoidance measures, I kind of went through this on an earlier slide, but sort of the major kind of phases of the construction will just be site preparation. So kind of arriving on site, installing erosion and sedimentation controls. There's going to be some temporary construction matting potentially to cross the floodplain and some areas where we have ditches that sort of segment the berms that the construction equipment will need to cross. So getting that material set up. Next is the sort of main portion of the work. So excavating the berm fill down to the design grade and relocating and regrading that material within the floodplain in accordance with the plans. Once the material is placed and graded, we have seeding within a portion of that using native salt tolerant seed mixtures. Any areas that are disturbed during construction will also be reseeded. But we're expecting that to be relatively minor. And yeah, I think I already sort of talked about access. As far as impact avoidance, again, primarily the use of erosion controls, which we note on the drawings, temporary turbidity curtain within the river to limit the spread of suspended solids. We do have natural heritage considerations at this site, mainly due to box turtles. So we'll be adhering to the time of year restrictions related to that, and we'll have turtle protection measures, which I think are discussed in the narrative to make sure we're not impacting box turtles. We don't have any tree removal as part of this project, so there's no issues related to time of year restriction for listed bat species. And then once the work is completed, all the temporary features like access roads and erosion and sediment controls will be removed. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Tim and Carol for the last couple slides.
Tim, do you want to address this or?
Yeah, so these are stipulations from DEP's thin layer placement guidance document that we've included in the filing. So we would commit to both construction monitoring, post-construction monitoring, looking at all these things. And so both the seashore and the project agencies are really interested in this ecological recovery, how the site functions with restored tidal flow under a range of different tidal regimes. So the rate of vegetation recovery, the stability of the elevation, erosion off of the site, creation, formation of hydraulic features on the area, all that is of huge interest, both for the evaluation, understanding of this project, but also as applied to other projects, as I said before. So yeah, so we intend, pretty comprehensive monitoring. This will be funded, a lot of this through the Friends of Heron River. There's some Park Service funding involved as well through some cooperators. So yeah, corrective action plan is part of the DEP guidance, looking at, identifying unknown or potential, things that can go wrong. Obviously, invasive species, in this case, primarily Phragmites, is a big concern. We don't want to grow Phragmites. This is why the elevations were chosen very carefully. So we have enough saltwater inundation to prevent or at least inhibit growth of Phragmites. The settlement of the material. We talk about the grades that Alex was referring to. Those are the grades where we're targeting and intend to maintain. So if there's settlement or erosion going on, maybe one of the benefits of having all this excess material is we have ample source to add material if we're losing elevation. Again, hydraulic features, the Duck Harbor situation is kind of a wild card, how that impacts the site. We have accommodated for the tide from Duck Harbor flowing through this area. Unsure exactly how it's going to affect it. So there could be a need to kind of manage that flow over and through and around the site. And certainly any of the the woody debris on the ground that is actually sort of growing sort of into the native soil pretty readily at this point, but any mobilized woody material, we would be monitoring that and remove that from the site so there's no backups or blockages to flow. And I guess that's what we had to.
Happy to thank you, Tim and Alex, and happy to entertain any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for the presentation. That's great. I have a few questions. This all seems to be predicated on adjusting the elevation to support a healthy marsh. What's the target? What's the target elevation after you clear the berms? Where the berms are now, what will the elevation be there after you remove the berm?
So there's a gradient, as shown on the plan, so right at the bank. I think it goes down to about 0.5. And then grades up to about 2.
Okay,
So the idea is it would be sort of a terraced, naturalized bank
I
along
see.
the edge of the river.
So that would take it up to, I think it was the middle of you had three elevations for.
Low marsh,
that-
high marsh, and yes.
So,
That's the low marsh elevation, 0.5 to 2.
Mhm.
So again,
So-
this is what we should have maybe put this in the slides, but it's important to understand this is under like a managed hydrology. So the initial set of tide gate openings down in Chequezet are producing a very muted tide range. So it's not designed for natural full tide range that will be seen, eventually, years from now. It's meant to function as an intertidal marsh with the muted hydrology we expect to see in the initial years of the project, with the idea and understanding and recognition that those are going to change, right? So as we create these habitats and tide ranges increased over time, those habitats are going to shift through the site, and we'll see about what to do about that. As I said, there's additional material. Maybe we will continue to add material to maintain those habitats, or let them transform into whatever they're going to be. But this is it's geared toward this muted tide range of a few feet that we're going to be experiencing in the first 3 years of the tide gate management process.
And that'll be the same elevation that the fill area will be, where that 4 acres that you're gonna fill.
Well, that has a gradient as well.
Mhm.
So the idea is to target low marsh, high marsh, and kind of a transition, sort of a shrub zone above the high marsh.
Mhm.
But all of those are future other types. So if if everything goes as we expect during this project period, we'll have low marsh at the low elevation, high marsh in the middle, and the shrub transition zone at the higher elevation. But over time, that low marsh could become mud flat, the high marsh could become low marsh, and the shrub zone could become high marsh without any other interventions.
Mm.
The idea is we want that to happen because we want to get the data. We want to see how the plant communities respond to these different elevations and the changing tide regime. That's the whole point of what we're trying to get out of the data in the project.
But Tim, is there gonna be a significant or a change to the drainage pattern that we're seeing now because of this, or you're leaving the channel untouched pretty much, right? Will there be, well, I guess not channel, huh? The river along the berm, you're not really doing anything in that low, where the water is running now, right? You're just gonna be removing.
Where the berms occur right on the bank.
Uh-huh.
No, I mean, we're not going beyond, other than to put in silt curtain and erosion control. The excavation will end at the bank of the river. I mean, the berms go right up to the bank of the river.
The removal of the berms will facilitate water coming off the marsh into the river. Right, Tim?
Sure, yeah, that's part of the
Yeah.
idea. So
Okay.
the portion of the berms are
Benefit to the hydrology.
So the berm is acting kind of like a dike.
As a levee.
As a
Right.
levee.
like a
Okay.
levee. It's both
All right.
keeping, so in the future, it's keeping the tides from Heron River going back into the marsh, and it's keeping the flow from Duck Harbor going into the river.
I see. Good.
And bear in
And
mind,
finally,
when this all is operating, High Toss Road will be gone, and the High Toss Road culvert will be gone.
Right,
So High Toss Road is really what's backing up Duck Harbor in a significant way, and all the flooding at Bound Brook Road and all that area is attributed to the High Toss culvert.
right.
So we're trying to look to these future, very dynamic conditions that this will be operating under.
So
Just the causeway was on, the rest of High Top will remove.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
The culvert is important.
Speaking of High Toss Road, will that be closed, access to High Toss Road closed, where the jetty starts? I mean, where the neighborhood stops, basically, in the sandy road that goes out to Duck Harbor Road. Will that section be open to foot traffic like it is now, and bikes, or will that be closed off of the gate?
It's gonna be removed.
The fill will be removed. I can't really speak to what the park may want to do about access over there.
In reading this, I noted that there was talk of closing access. I took it that was the road that you're putting in so that you can move this material.
I think during construction, access would probably be restricted just for public safety reasons. Yes.
Right.
Okay. Okay, that's my questions. John?
Yeah, I have some questions. So I understand that this is a pilot project. This is actually, scientific research. It's fairly limited. What is it, 4 or 6 acres? 6 acres.
6.5.
Okay, so we're gonna get, I understand it's research. We're gonna get 6 acres. But I have a little bit of discomfort with giving alternative 2 short shrift, because I think there's the potential by blocking the restoring the meanders of actually accumulating sediment over hundreds of acres of marsh, which, as you correctly stated, are way too low for salt marsh restoration. And we have no idea where material is going to come from to raise those elevations. So I guess the first question is, has the system ever been modeled? I know there's been many iterations of hydrodynamic modeling. Has there ever been any modeling done with those meanders, the old meanders in place, to get some insight onto whether there'd be increased sedimentation, just the restoration of a natural process of sedimentation into these hundreds of acres of low areas? If we use these spoil piles, these berm areas, are we losing an opportunity if we're just using them for this pilot project, and then carting most of it away?
So
That haven't been.
I wonder if there's been there's been some careful analysis of alternative 2.
So no, there hasn't been a model looking at the effect of the natural channels, but I will say that recently a model now exists that could be done. Another group from the one you're familiar with has developed a coupled hydrodynamic and sediment model, and they're not set up to incorporate that kind of change in the model right now, but at some point it could be done. But John, these models take a long time and they're expensive to put together, and we could be modeling and collecting data and surveying for a long time. The bridge is almost done. The bridge will be done within a year, and tides are going to be restored, and this is the opportunity to get that material out. If we can stockpile it and still have the opportunity to go back and bring it where it can be used in the system, or we learn more about where best to do that, we will have that opportunity. But we wanted to move ahead and do something, and take this opportunity to collect the data and understand the system better. And hopefully we'll have the opportunity to use the stockpile material down the road.
Okay. Another comment is that the channelization extended all the way to Route 6. And I wondered if your quantification of the available volume included all of that, the spoil piles.
No, all this investigation was strictly between High Toss and the Bound Brook culvert. So that's kind of like our project area. We haven't gone upstream to look at all. And the river up above Bound Brook, when it splits off from Bound Brook, it's in a pretty confined valley, compared to the rest of the system. So the channel, like the meander, it's much more confined in a valley. It doesn't have these big broad meanders that you see down by Pole Dyke and across Duck Harbor. But I'm sure there's
Right.
work out there as well. Just haven't looked
Okay,
at it.
so I wondered, I didn't see any, sorry about my voice. Soon I won't be able to speak at all. I wondered if I didn't notice anything about monitoring water quality when the berms are disturbed. I have observed out there that some of these berms include acid sulfate soils, this visible deposits of jarosite, which is a highly acidifying mineral left over from the oxidation of the sulfur. And in the past, when there have been puddles forming on these spoil piles, we've measured pHs as low as 2. And I think I read in your study that the spoil is described as primarily sandy. But it's just a concern I have, and the way I think the proper way to address that would be to do some level of water quality monitoring at the time these berms are disturbed in the receiving water in the area.
Yeah, so we have a continuous station right downstream that's collecting pH on a continuous basis, so we'd catch it there. And I can't speak to whether the park might be able to supplement the grab sampling in that area as well, but we think that our monitoring in place, at least a start to look at that.
A related question is how soon can we foresee seawater reaching that area given the current prospectus of restoration? Well, Duck Harbor is every month, right? So already, but beyond that.
So Carol can talk to this maybe more specifically than I can, but I think we're kind of in the back of our heads thinking about a year from now, actually next fall is when the first tide gate changes would be made. And we're hoping then that we can get to that endpoint we've identified in the first year by next spring. So basically like a 6-month period between say October and March is when we would reach the tidal elevation for which we designed these elevations for. So spring of 27.
And then when is the berm removal project planned? Is that going to be undertaken during the storming season this winter?
That would be the desire, yes.
Okay. Well, once that first step in tidal restoration, as I understand it, it's actually pretty substantial. This problem that I'm talking about goes away if you can maintain a salinity, decent proportion of seawater up there. That problem will go away. Just in initial steps, period after disturbance, I think it's something that should be looked at. It sounds like it should be covered if you've got continuous monitoring. Where is it, just above high toss?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. The other thing is, you say that the salt shrub community will be seeded with salt tolerant grasses. Will there be any seeding of the other zones within the 6 acres?
Alex, I don't remember. But
Yeah, we're not proposing any. I think because we just think natural recruitment of Spartina will happen pretty readily once tidal restoration is ongoing.
Okay. On page 18, you mentioned sea beach amaranth, and then you give the scientific name of which is actually spear-leaved Atriplex for starter, it's not, what we saw out there was the orac, not the amaranth. I think that's a mistake. I would just take note of it, check it. I think you've got the wrong species there. Also, other species that I think should be corrected is you mentioned the bordering vegetated wetland contained red oak, and I'm almost certain it's black oak because I still haven't seen any red oak out here. And then the final thing on vegetation is that the report mentions the common cattail, and the system is broadleaf cattail, and it's actually, as far as I know, it's narrowleaf cattail, Paphium angustifolia. That's it. Thanks.
Your estimates on saltwater flow, you said earlier that the High Toss Road was the biggest constraint. When is that going to be removed?
So
Carol,
the low road elevation project, which that bid just came in a couple weeks ago. The contract hasn't yet been awarded, but we hope that will happen sometime in later this month or early November. With tree clearing starting in December, the removal of high toss is desired to occur as one of the first phases of the work within that scope of road elevation work. It's actually a means and methods question, so it really will be a discussion with the selected contractor. But the idea would be for that to happen sometime. And again, this is the concept. It's a means and methods issue that has to be discussed with the contractor. But ideally, that would happen in the first phase of construction work, which would be next winter, 26, before Memorial Day in that stretch.
Oh, okay. That'll be interesting. Barbara?
Yes, I think this is a worthwhile experiment. I think it's good to take advantage of these berms to see if they can be used. I was wondering if there was any analysis of the soil in the berms for pollutants or compatibility with what's expected. I assume that the berm material came from the marsh to begin with, so I'm assuming it's compatible, but I'm wondering if there's been any comparison of the soils.
Yeah, that's why we cleared the trees before the Duck Harbor trees were cleared off to facilitate sediment coring. So this was done by a contractor the Park Service has used for hazardous waste cleanup all over the country. And so there were a number of cores taken, actually quite comprehensive on all of the berms. And so the berms are kind of in 9 discrete little sections, or some are little, some are big. There was one of the 9 sections that had elevated pHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are a product of combustion from the atmosphere. So those levels were moderate, and based on a risk assessment that was done specifically for the project and some other published values, that section of material, about 1,000 of the 10,000 yards, would have to be treated differently. It would need to be buried under clean material. So we haven't gotten into that level of detail in design yet, but essentially that, 1/10 of the overall material would need to be, it could be reused in the marsh, but it needs to have 6 inches to a foot of clean fill placed on top of it, or disposed of in some other similar way where it's basically not exposed to the environment. All of the other material can be reused in whatever way is most advantageous.
Thank you. One more about the box turtles. I'm wondering what the mitigation is going to be for any box turtles that might be in the berm area. If this is being done in the winter, that's when they're going to be ruminating in that area. So what's the mitigation plan? Not that I think it's something that should end the project. I think more box turtles get hit by cars in Wellfleet than by projects, but I'm just wondering what the mitigation is gonna be. If anybody knows.
So we have our consultant Oxbow has looked at the area. I don't, Carol, if you can correct me, I don't think they've found any turtles using any of the berms, even in the winter.
Correct, that's my understanding as well, yes.
As it says in the narrative that
But
there
there
were,
would still be contractor education, if a turtle is spotted, just like they've done down in Chiquezet, they found turtles. They stop work, they call Oxbow. They come and deal with it, whatever is appropriate. But we'll work with Heritage to have a written plan that they sign off on as well.
right, because if they're buried and you're excavating, you're not gonna know that they're there. It says that there are 2 that are detected with tags, but there may be more, so I'm just wondering what's gonna be done.
Do the commissioners have any more questions?
Bob does.
You're muted, Bob. There you go.
Thank you. How's the volume?
It's good.
Thank you. Going back to the polyaromatic hydrocarbons on page 9 of the document, I'd be very surprised if that's atmospheric fallout, especially if the detected concentrations are above the regulated criteria. If that were atmospheric fallout, I would expect to see comparable values just about every other place that you sampled there. So I think your consultant needs to take another look at that. Now, the proposed remedy of burying that may be all right, but again, I think that particular subject needs another look. Also, excuse me, today we got copied on the email from Department of Marine Fisheries. And in that, my principal takeaway is that you can work within a 6-month period in any given year. And that may or may not include box turtles. So is that your plan, to abide by this schedule that's set out by Department of Marine Fisheries, or is that already in place?
So our understanding of the time of year restriction that it would apply is for in-water work in the channel. So it wouldn't encompass the entire project area. And we did have an opportunity to meet with Amanda Davis, I think last week. Tim and I met with her to review her comments. And that was our understanding from that meeting.
Okay, and that applies to Pole Dyke Road too, taking out the dirt road portion?
It would be for any work in the channel.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions here. In removing the Phragmites, how deep do you go?
We're not proposing to proactively remove any Phragmites.
That we decided.
That's included, I think there's a reference to that in the corrective action plan.
Oh, okay, I thought there was some discussion about that earlier when Mr. Smith was giving the overview of.
Well, I mean, it depends how extensive regrowth is. If it's a few stems, it could be pulled out by hand or mechanically. I mean, we don't know. We don't know what the conditions may be. So it's something we'll monitor, and we'll take whatever actions that would be needed.
Okay, so in removing these plants, this is just the new growth essentially, not the. Okay, thank you. And to actually move the soil in the berms, are you planning to use an excavator similar to the one that took down all the dead trees with the wide tracks? That machine had very wide tracks to spread out the weight and make
there's a
sure it
number-
didn't subside into the marsh.
there's a number of contractors who specialize in doing wetland restoration who have appropriate equipment, and we hope they bid on the job and that they can do the work without undue impacts to the marsh.
I think we do
Okay.
specify the low ground pressure equipment is required on the drawings.
Okay, thank you. And of course, you talked about funding this project. How much funding is in place right now?
Funding is,
Is there enough money to complete the phase of the project that's been proposed so far?
Yes, not the removal of the entire 7,000 cubic yards of remaining berm.
Okay,
I have one comment or concern. I am a little concerned that the monitoring plan says that there's no formal baseline data. And that is a little concerning, especially because if we are going to use this as a model without baseline data, it'll be hard to apply it to future projects. But it sounds like you've done some soil sampling and you have all that LiDAR data. So would that be available? Is that going to be included in any of the monitoring reports, kind of what's there on the ground now?
Well, yeah, certainly what we have readily available. I guess that was referring to the conditions of the placement site, the marsh where we're gonna put the material. I mean, the DEP guidance says they want, vegetation, structure, wildlife use of the area. And that's why I showed those pictures. I mean, there's kind of nothing there. I mean, even in the summertime, there's bare areas. And it's all changing as well. So, by next summer it could grow in more. So it's like those sort of existing conditions of the restoration marsh itself. I'm not sure how relevant they are. Things like the existing elevation, the hydrology, things like that. We have a lot of that, and would certainly be incorporated into any kind of change detection or things like that.
And then my other question when it comes to monitoring is, that monitoring section was very brief, and I think that is what is going to be most important, is knowing what's going on out there, and then being able to use that in the future. But so how often, it says that you have to do seasonal and yearly monitoring reports, but how often do you anticipate somebody out there physically monitoring? Is that a National Park Service question, so we can't answer it?
Even that question is a question. There's a lot of questions about the Park Service. So I understand that we need to do a lot more work on the monitoring plan. That was just to kind of give an indication of those kind of things that would be looked at, but who actually will do it, and those frequencies and things like that, we have to work that out with the park and other partners as well.
Okay, well, the other elephant in the room is the 7,000 cubic yards of material that you're going to cache away someplace. Where do you plan on putting that?
Well, we've talked with the seashore about it. They have a spot they could put it if it had to. And we've talked to the town about both the sand pit and the landfill or transfer station.
Mm-hmm.
The transfer station, we're told that can definitely use it, but we can't get it back again. That would be it. They'd use it for daily cover. But it's in the last resort, it's a place where it could go if it had to. We prefer it go to the sand pit or to a Park Service location where it could be retrieved and used again.
Okay.
Understanding, moving it again is not desirable either, but it's a situation that we have here to work with.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm still confused about the 7,000 cubic yards. Will that be removed this winter?
Most likely not, no.
Okay,
The
so we
money-
don't know when that will be moved.
Correct, exact timing of that is not known.
Okay.
So will
Do we
it just be piled up along Duck Harbor Road?
Well, the berms will remain intact, so a portion of the berms would be removed for the 3,000 cubic yards to be placed.
I see.
And then as funding is available, the other berms would be excavated. If funding is available and it can be excavated, but there's no immediate use, it could be stockpiled for later use.
So you'll be starting from the northern end? And that material will be moved down to the low-lying area, just above Duck Harbor Road where it curves.
Correct, and I would defer to Alex. He was outlining the construction, but it was to start at the northern end and move separately, correct, Alex?
Yeah, because the berms themselves will basically be the access route for the construction equipment to move along the alignment of where the berms are located. So we want to excavate out from the farthest end, which is at the northern side, farthest from High Toss Road, so that we don't end up with, basically a gap that then has to be bridged with matting or just make access more difficult. So, I mean, I think basically what we're asking for a permit to do is to excavate all 10,000 cubic yards and then reuse the 3,000 within the marsh, and then the other 7,000 is sort of TBD as to what will happen.
Well, I just want to tack on to that. Thank you, Alex. I think, we would fully intend to keep you apprised. We don't want to make this sort of like a puzzle or a mystery. I mean, as soon as there's information about the timing of removal, the use of that material, we would share that for your.
All right, so even though you don't have a timetable, you're asking for approval for the 10,000.
That's correct. Yeah.
Is all this material on the west side of the main stem?
I believe so, yes. Wes?
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
so there was no need for crossing the main stem. I'd love to see it
And
gone.
that's why it's very difficult crossing the main stem, so. And there's not that, there are berms on the other side, but they're small. And as part of this project, to make the effort to cross the river for a relatively small amount of material didn't seem worth incorporating. So that will be a separate project if and when we ever get to that.
Is there any public comment?
Any online?
A question, so when is the high toss,
Identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Kevin McMahon, I'm in a butter. And thank you for having us, appreciate it. I got the information through Carol, she sent me an email and I'm still confused, so the timelines especially. We are on Brown's Neck, but down to our property line goes to Holdyke. First of all, we don't really know how this impacts the abutters, that's the first question. The second is, when is the High Toss Road elevation happening? And why couldn't the material being excavated be used for that project?
I can speak to the that latter part
Right.
of the question. So like I was explaining, so the removal of that portion of causeway, right, is desired by the town to be one of the first pieces of road work that's undertaken.
Right.
That's a conversation that has to be agreed to by the selected contractor because it's a means and methods issue. But the plan for the elevation of that 1,000 linear feet essentially from Way 672 to Hopkins.
Right.
Is that's the material from that causeway that's gonna be excavated, that will be that material.
Okay,
So that's the material that would be used for that portion of the elevation.
got it.
I don't believe there are any impacts to abutters as a result of this pilot project, and I'll defer to Tim and Alex to comment on that further. I mean, there wouldn't be any impacts to adjacent properties.
I mean, there's no direct work or anything. I guess, depending on where you live, the only impact really would just be, construction traffic or things like that, on a temporary basis.
Yeah,
Okay. That's cool.
And the abutters list, because this is an amendment, we were advised that we had to send the notifications, the same list of abutters who are notified for the entire project.
So look forward to more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments or concerns?
Can I make a motion?
Yes, you may.
I move that we approve this amended order of conditions for berm removal and marsh restoration pilot project with, Lisa, any conditions?
I just want to make sure, just one condition that we get monitoring reports until the certificate of completion is issued. Or further, if you have them, but. I think post-construction monitoring reports is where all ecological restoration things fail, as you guys probably all know. So I just wanted, that'll be a condition.
Sure, absolutely.
Second, Michael.
All right. Michael,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Robert? So yes? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Bob.
I vote yes as well, but it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. You've taken a lot of time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
well, thank you for explaining it, because going through all this, it was a little bit.
Sorry for the.
I did go through it, but I didn't get.
I
the answers to pop out.
Everything else, it's a CO.
Down, but,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, so fast, excellent work. Excellent. It's nice.
someone signing off name to these?
No, Bob, I'm gonna need you to come into the office when you're back again to sign these things.
Understood. I'll make a point of it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. And hopefully- Okay, we have a couple more pieces of business to conduct. Marjorie Alonso, 90 Ring Road, map 41, parcels 96 and 97. SE 077-1594. It's a request for certificate of compliance for work. My understanding is we don't really, no work was actually done, and we're not even clear on.
Yeah, we don't have, this was a fairly new permit. I emailed everybody about it.
Right.
This was a fairly new permit, so I'm sure it got misfiled, and when something is misfiled, you don't find it until you accidentally stumble upon it.
Yeah.
So no work was completed. I did have a question about the shower and some concrete stone pathways. I talked to the property owner and she said that those things have been there for a long time and she did place them. But I recommend that nothing we can really do about it, especially if we don't have the plan to see if they were actually there. So I recommend approving the request that no work has commenced, so it's an invalid order.
So moved, Michael.
Second.
Second?
All right.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
And Robert?
Yes,
And yes, okay. The next one is. I guess we have to sign them.
We have a sign.
Oh, before I get my mouth full, I have a.
Jen, I'm just gonna hand this one to you.
Okay, I'll put it. I have to click.
I can't do it.
It's okay.
Okay. While the seeker is circulating, I'll read off the next one. David J. Penfield, 114 Fourth Street, map 40, parcel 108. That's E077-1061, a request for certificate of compliance. And what was the story on this one?
To the beach?
Yeah. These are stairs to the beach. They're built according to plan. We did find the permit, but they're built according to plan. We were just on that site for a septic system. There's no outstanding violations. So I recommend approval.
I move that we approve the request for compliance for Smithfield.
Second, Michael.
Yes.
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 Yes, and Bob?
yes,
Okay, good.
There are two coming around. One is for the one that we approved, and then they have another much older permit for a well that got a certificate of compliance but was never recorded. So you just need to sign it to confirmatory cert.
Oh, well.
Mhm.
So we don't have to vote on it since we already voted.
It's all, yeah, this is just formality.
Just having a piece of paper.
Yep. Yeah, the CO's certificate of compliance is here, but it was never recorded, so it's still on the deed.
Right. So with that, I move that we adjourn the hearing, public hearing.
Second, Michael. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and Bob?
yes.
Okay, with that, good, all right. We will now. The business meeting will now be in session. In attendance, we still have Michael Fisher, John Portnoy, Bob Brennisell, Leon Shreves, and Bob Stewart. Do we have any jurisdictional opinions?
No.
Good, how about mail-in discussion?
I have one little announcement. The
Okay.
AmeriCorps member starts in 2 weeks. So
Which day of the week is?
we'll have them Tuesdays.
Okay.
Which one have we do?
We're gonna do an actual survey of all our coastal engineering structures.
And beach renourishment.
And beach renourishment and marry the permits with the structures and help organize that.
That's a
And,
good
you
idea.
know,
An inventory,
yeah,
paperwork.
okay, well, they'll have to be on the beach, and then they're also gonna be doing some. Help us get a pollinator garden going.
Oh, cool.
Great. Anything else to discuss, be informed of? Not, so the next order of piece of business is approval of the meeting minutes for October 1st.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes of October 1st.
Second, Michael?
Yes. Yes.
I wasn't here.
Yes, and Bob?
Yes,
Great. Okay, so that's a done deal, and. I was
He
like-
just wants the meeting to be over.
I tried.
It
And
was too much.
the next meeting, the next public hearing meeting will be on the 5th of November. I move that. we
One
adjourn-
announcement,
Oh,
we're gonna have a Chitlins Cove meeting. Right before Chitlin Cove opens. So it's next week, I think.
We are?
The weekend.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
When you say we. that
This,
we, or that's, who's that?
no,
Who says we?
that's Alicia and I representing Nancy and Pat Winslow representing the shellfish.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's a working.
The 29th, I think it is.
Yeah,
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to hear how that comes out. And the goal of that meeting is to determine if any damage to the.
no,
No.
it's to develop a management plan.
Okay. Interesting.
Which Alicia's gonna do. She
Do you have any proposals, specific proposals for the group or? Not yet,
Not yet.
okay.
I mean, we have Brian's very complex analysis of the area.
Mm.
So anyway, we'll see.
Anything else? I move that we adjourn the business meeting?
Second, Michael? Yes.
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 Yes, and Bob? You okay with
Yes.
that?
yes, I am.